There are secrets that families keep locked away in closets, hidden in drawers, buried in memories they'd rather forget. And then there are secrets so dark, so disturbing, that they're sealed away in attics, waiting decades to be discovered, waiting to drag the past screaming back into the present. Welcome to Dark Case Files. I'm your host, and before we climb those attic stairs into one of the most chilling family discoveries ever made in the American South, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The cases we cover here don't just tell stories. They reveal the darkness that can hide in plain sight, behind normal facades in ordinary homes. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because this story starts in Beaufort, South Carolina, but its horror is universal. Today, we're traveling back to 1947, to a coastal town trying to rebuild after war, to a family inheriting a legacy they never wanted, to an attic that held evidence of crimes so disturbing that everyone who knew about them had conspired to forget. This is the true story of the Harris family, and what they found hidden above their heads, proof of a case so dark that it had been deliberately buried for decades. And the most terrifying part? The person responsible had been living among them all along. Beaufort, South Carolina, November 1947. The war has been over for 2 years, and America is trying to return to normalcy. The boys are home. Factories are converting back to peacetime production. Families are rebuilding, moving forward, trying to forget the horrors of the past decade. In this coastal town, with its antebellum architecture and moss-draped oaks, life moves slowly. Everyone knows everyone. Families have roots going back generations. And secrets, when they exist, are kept with the same careful maintenance as the historic homes that line the streets. The Harris family is one of Beaufort's old families. Not wealthy, not powerful, but established, respectable. Robert Harris, 52, is a veteran of the Great War. The first one, the one they said would end all wars. He's practical, stoic, a man who believes in hard work and facing problems head on. His wife, Margaret, 48, comes from a family with what the locals call the sight, a sensitivity to things others can't perceive. Their son, James, 27, recently returned from the Pacific Theater, carries the quiet trauma of war in his eyes. They've just inherited the old Harris estate from Robert's uncle, Edmund Harris, who died alone in October at the age of 73. Edmund had been a recluse for the last 20 years of his life, rarely leaving the decaying Victorian mansion at the edge of town, refusing visitors, living in isolation that the townspeople had learned not to question. The house stands like a tomb at the end of Pinckney Street. 3 stories of peeling paint and rotting wood, windows like dead eyes staring out at the street. The locals avoid walking past it after dark. Children dare each other to touch the front gate, but no one will say exactly why they're afraid. It's just understood that house is wrong. Robert doesn't believe in superstition. He sees valuable property going to waste. Against Margaret's protests, and she protests strongly, with a fear in her voice that Robert has never heard before, he decides to move the family in. They'll renovate, restore, make it livable again. Maybe even sell it for a profit. Robert, please, Margaret begs on the morning they're supposed to move in. There's something evil in that house. I can feel it. My grandmother could feel these things too, and she taught me to trust the feeling. We shouldn't go there. It's just an old house, Margaret. Nothing a little work won't fix. We're not going to let superstition cost us this opportunity. But Margaret knows better. She's always known better. The gift runs in her family, the ability to sense when something is profoundly wrong, when darkness has soaked into a place so deeply that it can never be completely cleaned out. And that house? Every fiber of her being screams danger. They move in on November 3rd, 1947, a cold gray morning with fog rolling in from the water. As they carry boxes across the threshold, Margaret feels it immediately, that oppressive weight in the air, like invisible hands pressing down on her chest. The house is watching them, judging them, waiting. James feels it too, though he doesn't say anything at first. He sees, learned in war, that sometimes you have to walk into danger, even when every instinct screams to run. But this house reminds him of certain places in the Pacific, places where terrible things had happened, where the earth itself seemed contaminated by violence. The first few weeks are devoted to cleaning and sorting through Uncle Edmund's belongings. The old man had lived like a hermit, surrounded by decades of accumulated possessions. His papers are a mess, bills, receipts, letters, journals filled with entries that make no sense. James is the one who finds the journals, stacked in Edmund's bedroom closet. He starts reading them out of curiosity, then continues out of growing unease. Edmund's handwriting deteriorates over the years, from neat script in the 1920s to barely legible scrawls in his final entries. The content is even more disturbing. Early entries are mundane, weather observations, financial notes, social engagements. But starting in 1927, the tone changes. Edmund begins writing about the burden of knowledge, about what must be kept hidden, about the price of silence. One entry from 1932 stops James cold. They know. They've always known. The attic keeps the secret, and the secret keeps me. I am the guardian now. I cannot leave. I cannot speak. The door must remain locked until I am gone, and then God help whoever opens it. James shows the journal to his father that evening. Robert reads the entry, frowns, and dismisses it. Old man was losing his mind. Living alone like that for so long, it's no wonder he went a bit mad. Probably hiding his money up there, or some such nonsense. But Margaret, reading over his shoulder, goes pale. What secret? What's in the attic? They all look up, as if they could see through the ceiling to the third floor. None of them have ventured up there yet. The attic door, they discovered on the first day, is locked from the outside, a heavy padlock securing it shut as if to keep something in, or to keep someone out. Robert makes a note to break the lock eventually, but there's so much other work to do. The house is a disaster, leaking pipes, broken windows, rotting floorboards. The attic can wait, but the attic has other plans. The sounds begin on the fourth night that Margaret hears it first. She's lying in bed, Robert snoring softly beside her, when she becomes aware of a sound from above. Soft at first, rhythmic. Scratch, 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 like fingernails dragging across wood. She tells herself it's rats. Old houses have rats. But even as she thinks it, she knows it's not true. The sound is too deliberate, too measured. And rats don't pause when you sit up in bed, listening. Rats don't seem to know you're paying attention. The scratching stops the moment Margaret fully wakes. The silence that follows is worse than the sound. It's the silence of something waiting, something listening back. She lies awake until dawn, too frightened to move. The next night, James hears it too. His bedroom is on the second floor, directly below the attic access point. The sounds are louder here, more distinct. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps pacing back and forth, across the attic floor. Back and forth, back and forth. The steady rhythm of someone thinking, planning, waiting. James gets out of bed, stands in the middle of his room, looking up at the ceiling. The footsteps continue for another minute, then stop abruptly. The silence presses down like a physical weight. Who's up there? James calls out, his voice steady despite his racing heart. No answer. Just silence. And the overwhelming sensation of being watched. At breakfast the next morning, James and Margaret compare notes. Robert is skeptical, but clearly troubled. He's heard the sounds too. Lying awake last night, he'd heard what sounded like furniture being moved across the attic floor. Heavy dragging sounds, as if someone was rearranging things up there. It's just the house settling, he insists, but his voice lacks conviction. These old places make all kinds of noises. The temperature changes, the wood expands and contracts. Wood doesn't walk, Dad, James says quietly. Wood doesn't pace back and forth for hours. That afternoon, Robert goes into town to the Historical Society, hoping to learn more about the house's history. What he discovers makes his blood run cold. The librarian, Mrs. Beatrice Wentworth, a woman in her 70s who's lived in Beaufort her entire life, goes quiet when he mentions the Harris estate. "You're living there now?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper. "We inherited it from my uncle. We're fixing it up." Mrs. Wentworth studies him for a long moment, then makes a decision. "Come with me," she says, leading him to a back room where old newspapers are stored. She pulls out a bound volume from 1927 and opens it to a specific page. The headline reads, "Local woman missing, foul play suspected." Robert reads the article, his hands beginning to shake. Catherine Harris, Edmund's wife, had disappeared on March 15th, 1927. She'd been seen arguing with Edmund earlier that day. Neighbors reported hearing screams that night. But when the sheriff investigated, Edmund claimed Catherine had run off with another man, taking her belongings with her. The sheriff hadn't believed him. An investigation was launched. The house was searched, but nothing was found. No body, no evidence of violence, no trace of Catherine Harris at all. The case remained open for 2 years, then was quietly closed. Edmund Harris came from money. He had connections. And in 1920s South Carolina, powerful men could make inconvenient questions go away. Everyone knew he'd killed her, Mrs. Wentworth says quietly, but no one could prove it. And eventually, people stopped talking about it. Easier to forget, you see. Easier to let it fade away. Did they search the attic? Robert asks, though he already knows the answer. Mrs. Wentworth's expression is grim. The attic was locked. Edmund said he'd lost the key. The sheriff could have broken it down, but Edmund's lawyer threatened lawsuits, claimed unlawful search. In the end, the sheriff gave up. He didn't have enough evidence to force the issue. Robert drives home in a daze. The journal entries suddenly make terrible sense. The attic keeps the secret. I am the guardian now. The door must remain locked. What had Edmund been guarding all those years? That evening, Robert tells Margaret and James what he's learned. The color drains from Margaret's face. "We have to open it," James says. "We have to know." "Maybe we should call the police," Margaret suggests. "Let them handle it." "And tell them what?" Robert asks. "That we think our uncle might have murdered his wife 20 years ago? Based on old journals and town gossip? They'll laugh us out of the station. Then we open it ourselves," James says firmly. "Whatever's up there, we need to know. The sounds aren't going to stop. And I don't think it's just in our heads. Something is up there. Something that wants to be found. The decision is made. Tomorrow, they'll break the lock and open the attic. But that night, the sounds from above become violent. It starts around midnight. Not scratching or footsteps this time, but pounding. Furious, desperate pounding, as if someone is trying to break through the floor. The entire house shakes with the force of it. All three of them converge in the hallway, staring up at the attic door. The pounding continues, rhythmic and desperate. And beneath it, they hear something else. A voice. Muffled, distant, but unmistakably human. A woman's voice, crying out words they can't quite make out. Margaret starts to cry. James grabs a flashlight and the crowbar they've been using for renovation work. Robert, his face set in grim determination, nods. "We're opening it now." They climb the stairs to the 3rd floor, the pounding growing louder with each step. The attic door stands before them like a sealed tomb. The padlock is old, rusted, but still solid. The pounding from beyond has stopped now, replaced by that terrible waiting silence. James raises the crowbar. Ready? Robert and Margaret nod. James swings. The first strike rings out like a gunshot in the quiet house. The padlock holds. He swings again. Again. On the fourth strike, the lock breaks free, clattering to the floor with a sound like a death knell. The door swings open slowly, revealing steep stairs, ascending into darkness. The smell hits them immediately, musty, stale air that hasn't circulated in decades, mixed with something else. Something sweet and rotten and wrong. James shines his flashlight up the stairs. The beam cuts through the darkness, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air like tiny spirits. I'm going up. We go together, Robert says, finding his courage. The three of them climb, each step growing under their weight. The attic is larger than expected, running the entire length of the house. Old furniture sits covered in white sheets like a gathering of ghosts. Boxes are stacked everywhere, creating a maze of shadows. And there, in the far corner beneath a small circular window, they see it, a steamer trunk. Large, old-fashioned, the kind people used for long sea voyages. It sits alone in a cleared space, as if everything else had been deliberately moved away from it. The wood is dark with age, and across the lid, someone has carved words in deep, jagged letters. Forgive me. Margaret makes a sound, half sob, half gasp. Don't open it. Please, Robert, don't open it. But they've come too far to turn back now. They need to know. They need to end this. James and Robert approach the trunk together. There's no lock on it, just a simple latch. James's hand is shaking as he reaches for it. On three, Robert says. 1, 2, 3. They lift the lid. The smell that escapes is overwhelming. Decay and chemicals. The sickly sweet scent of death, poorly preserved. Margaret turns away, gagging. But James and Robert force themselves to look. Inside the trunk, wrapped in a deteriorating wedding dress, is a skeleton. Small, delicate bones. Female. The skull still has traces of dark hair clinging to it. And there, on the skeletal left hand, a wedding ring. But that's not all. Scattered around the body are newspaper clippings, dozens of them, all about Catherine Harris's disappearance. And tucked into the ribs, where a heart would have been, is a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon. James carefully removes the letters, his hands shaking. He opens the first one. It's dated March 14th, 1927, one day before Catherine disappeared. The letter is from Catherine to someone named Thomas. It's a love letter, passionate and planning. She's going to leave Edmund, she writes. She's going to run away with Thomas and start a new life. She just needs one more day to gather her things. James reads more letters. They paint a picture of an affair, of a woman desperate to escape an unhappy marriage, of plans for a future that would never come. And at the bottom of the trunk, beneath the body, they find Edmund's confession, written in his precise handwriting on pages that have yellowed with age. March 15th, 1927. I have done something unforgivable. I found the letters. I confronted Catherine. She laughed at me, said she never loved me, that she'd been planning to leave for months. We argued. She tried to leave. I couldn't let her. I couldn't let her leave me for him. I didn't plan to kill her. But once I started, I couldn't stop. My hands around her throat, her eyes going wide and empty. The terrible silence after. I panicked. I didn't know what to do with the body. If I buried her outside, someone might find her. If I took her away, I might be seen. So I brought her here, to the attic. I sealed her in the trunk with her wedding dress, the dress she wore when she promised to be mine forever. I told everyone she ran away. Let them search. Let them suspect. They would never find her. She would be mine forever, here in this house, but I was wrong. She hasn't left. I feel her every day, hear her every night. She paces above me, scratching at the walls, crying out. Or perhaps it's my guilt that paces and cries. I can no longer tell the difference. I am her prisoner now, as surely as she is mine. I cannot leave this house, cannot abandon my post. I am the guardian of this terrible secret, and I will remain so until death releases me. And even then, I fear she won't let me go. The confession goes on for several pages, chronicling Edmund's descent into isolation and madness, his conviction that Catherine's spirit haunted the attic, his belief that only his constant presence in the house kept her contained. Robert sinks to his knees, the papers falling from his hands. My God, all these years, 20 years she's been up here. Not just her bones, Margaret whispers. She's still here. Don't you feel it? She's been trying to tell us. The sounds, the crying, she wanted to be found. As if in response, the temperature in the attic drops suddenly. The flashlight flickers. And in the corner of the room, just at the edge of the light's reach, they all see it. A shadow that doesn't match any of the furniture. A shadow in the shape of a woman, Dot. It doesn't move toward them. Doesn't threaten. It just stands there, as if waiting. Mrs. Harris, James says softly, his voice trembling. Catherine, we found you. We'll make this right. I promise. The shadow seems to nod, though it might be a trick of the flickering light. And then it's gone. The flashlight steadies. The temperature returns to normal, and the oppressive weight that has pressed down on them since entering the house lifts, like a held breath finally released. They don't sleep that night. Robert calls the police at first light, and by 8 in the morning, Sheriff Thomas Morrison arrives with 2 deputies. He's skeptical at first. The Harris family wouldn't be the first to make up stories about the old house. But when they lead him to the attic and show him the trunk, his expression changes from doubt to horror. Jesus Christ, he breathes, staring at the skeleton. It's really her. After all these years. The sheriff had been a young deputy in 1927, part of the original investigation into Catherine's disappearance. He'd believed Edmund was guilty then, but they'd never found enough evidence. Now, 20 years later, the truth had finally surfaced. The house is quickly cordoned off as a crime scene. More officers arrive. A doctor is called to examine the remains. Photographers document everything. And slowly, methodically, the attic gives up its secrets. In addition to Catherine's body and Edmund's confession, they find more disturbing evidence. A journal that Edmund kept after the murder, documenting his deteriorating mental state. Newspaper clippings about the investigation, annotated with Edmund's increasingly paranoid notes. And most chillingly, dozens of sketches. Crude drawings of a woman's face, done over and over, as if Edmund was trying to remember what his wife looked like, or perhaps trying to exorcise her image from his mind. The medical examiner confirms what they suspected. The bones are female. The right age, and the damage to the hyoid bone is consistent with strangulation. The wedding ring matches descriptions of Catherine's from the missing person report. There's no doubt this is Catherine Harris. But the investigation reveals something else. In going through Edmund's financial records, they discover he'd been paying someone. Regular monthly payments to a man named Thomas Blackwood, starting in 1927 and continuing until Thomas's death in 1943. Thomas Blackwood, Catherine's lover. The man she'd planned to run away with. Detective work reveals the truth. Thomas had known Edmund killed Catherine. He'd suspected immediately when she failed to meet him as planned. But instead of going to the police, he'd gone to Edmund and blackmailed him. For 16 years, Edmund had paid for Thomas's silence. The payments only stopped when Thomas died in a factory accident. An accident that, upon closer examination of old records, might not have been accidental at all. Edmund's journal from 1943 contains an entry. The other guardian is gone. Now I alone keep the secret. The burden is lighter without his demands, heavier without his shared knowledge. Had Edmund killed Thomas too? There was no way to prove it now. Both men were dead, their secrets buried with them. The story hits the newspapers like a bomb. Murder in the attic, 20-year-old mystery solved, reads the headline in the Beaufort Gazette. National papers pick it up. For a week, the Harris house is the most famous or infamous address in South Carolina. Reporters camp outside. Photographers climb trees, trying to get shots of the attic window. True crime enthusiasts make pilgrimages to stare at the house where a woman was murdered and hidden for 2 decades. The Harris family becomes reluctant celebrities. They're interviewed constantly, asked to describe the sounds they heard the moment they found the body. How it felt to live in a house with a corpse sealed in the attic. Margaret refuses most interviews, traumatized by the experience. But she does speak to one reporter from the Charleston Post, a woman who seems genuinely interested in Catherine's story, rather than just the sensational details. People want to focus on the horror, Margaret says. On the body in the trunk, the ghost sounds, all of that. But what about Catherine? She was a real person with hopes and dreams. She wanted to escape an unhappy marriage. She fell in love. She made plans for a future. And she was murdered for it. Edmund stole her life, then stole her death by hiding her away where no one could find her, where no one could mourn her properly. For 20 years, she was just erased, as if she'd never existed. That's the real horror of this case. The reporter asks about the supernatural elements, the sounds, the presence Margaret felt in the house. Margaret is quiet for a long moment. I don't know if what we experienced was really Catherine's ghost, or if it was guilt manifesting, or just the power of suggestion in a house with such dark history. But I do know this. The moment we found her, the moment we brought her story to light, everything changed. The house felt different, lighter. Whatever was there, ghost or memory or accumulated evil, it was gone. Catherine wanted to be found. She wanted her story told. And now it has been. Catherine Harris is finally laid to rest on December 2nd, 1947, 20 years, 8 months, and 17 days after her death. The funeral is surprisingly well attended. Many of the same people who'd gossiped about her running off in 1927 now come to pay their respects, perhaps feeling guilty for not believing she'd been in danger. Her grave is in Beaufort Cemetery, beneath a massive oak tree. The headstone reads, Catherine Harris, 1899 to 1927, found at last. May she rest in peace. Thomas Blackwood's grave is in the same cemetery, though on the other side. No one speaks his name at Catherine's funeral. His role in her story, lover turned extortionist, has complicated his legacy beyond redemption. Edmund Harris's grave is there too, though significantly, no one places flowers on it. He's buried in the family plot, but his headstone is smaller than the others, set slightly apart. The family's shame, even in death. After Catherine's funeral, the Harris family faces a decision. What to do with the house? Robert wants to sell it immediately, but no one will buy it. The story is too well known, the infamy too great. Several potential buyers walk through, but all refuse to make offers. One woman claims she felt watched the entire time she was there. A man says he heard crying from the attic, even though the attic has been thoroughly cleaned and is now empty. In January 1948, the Harris family makes a drastic decision. They'll tear the house down. It's an expensive choice, and not a popular one with historic preservationists who argue that the house, despite its dark history, is an important example of Victorian architecture. But Robert is firm. Some places are too stained by evil to be redeemed, he says. That house took my uncle's soul and held a woman's body prisoner for 20 years. It deserves to be destroyed. The demolition begins in February. Workers report strange occurrences, tools going missing, then reappearing in odd places, unexplained cold spots, the persistent feeling of being watched. Several workers quit, refusing to continue. Those who stay do so reluctantly, working as quickly as possible to finish the job and leave. The attic is demolished last, almost ceremonially. As the walls come down, workers find more evidence of Edmund's obsession. Scratches on the inside of the attic walls, where he'd apparently clawed at the wood during his worst moments. More drawings hidden between wall studs, and most disturbingly, a small altar of sorts built into a hidden space behind the chimney. On the altar, a photograph of Catherine. Candles burned down to nubs, and a handwritten note. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Please let me go. The house is completely demolished by March 15th, 1948, exactly 21 years after Catherine's murder. The lot is cleared, the debris hauled away. For a few months, it's just an empty space. A gap in the street, like a missing tooth. Eventually, the lot is sold to a developer who builds a simple, modern house on the site, deliberately designed to look nothing like the Victorian mansion that stood there before. The new house is all clean lines and big windows, as if trying to flood the space with light and chase away any lingering shadows. The family who moves in knows nothing of the history. They're new to Beaufort, transferred from Ohio for work. They live there happily for years, reporting no strange occurrences, no sounds in the night, no sense of unease. The darkness, it seems, has finally been cleansed. But what of the Harris family? How do they recover from such an experience? Robert never fully does. The knowledge that his uncle was a murderer, that he'd lived with that secret for 2 decades, haunts him. He becomes withdrawn, prone to dark moods. He sees Edmund's face in his own mirror sometimes, wondering if the capacity for such evil runs in the blood. He dies in 1955 of a heart attack, aged just 60. His last words to Margaret are reportedly, "Tell Catherine I'm sorry. Tell her we didn't know." Margaret lives longer, but carries her own scars. Her sensitivity to the supernatural, which had warned her about the house from the beginning, becomes stronger after the discovery. She claims she can sense Catherine sometimes, particularly near the cemetery. She visits me, Margaret tells James in 1962. Not in a frightening way. More like checking in, making sure I'm all right. She's at peace now, but she remembers that we found her, that we gave her justice. I think she's grateful. Margaret dies in 1968, aged 69. She's buried in Beaufort Cemetery, not far from Catherine's grave. Some report seeing 2 shadowy figures near the grave sometimes, standing together peacefully, though this is likely just local legend building on the famous story. James is perhaps the most deeply affected. The war had already damaged him, and the discovery in the attic reopened psychological wounds he'd been trying to heal. He struggles with nightmares, sometimes about the Pacific Theater, sometimes about the attic, often both merged into one horrifying dreamscape. He becomes obsessed with understanding what drove Edmund to murder. He reads extensively about psychology, domestic violence, obsession, and guilt. He writes a manuscript about the case, though he never publishes it, feeling it would be exploitative of Catherine's memory. In his private papers, found after his death in 1989, James writes, "People want to believe that evil is something other, something distant and inhuman, a monster in the shadows. But Edmund wasn't a monster. He was a man, insecure, possessive, unable to accept rejection. He made a terrible choice in a moment of rage, then spent 20 years trying to hide from what he'd done. The real horror isn't that he killed Catherine. The real horror is that he almost got away with it. If we hadn't inherited that house, if we hadn't heard those sounds, if we hadn't been brave enough to open that attic door, Catherine would still be there, undiscovered, unmourned, erased. How many other Catherines are there? Hidden in attics and basements and shallow graves? How many secrets are still locked away, waiting for someone brave enough to expose them? That's what keeps me awake at night. Not the memory of Catherine's bones, but the thought of all the other victims we haven't found yet. The case has a lasting impact on Beaufort itself. For years afterward, it's known as that town with the body in the attic. Tourism increases. Morbid curiosity drives people to visit the cemetery, to walk past the lot where the house once stood, to imagine the horror that unfolded there. But gradually, as decades pass, the story fades from immediate memory into local legend. By the 1980s, newcomers to Beaufort often don't know the story. The lot where the Harris house stood is just another address. Catherine's grave is just another old headstone in a cemetery full of them. But the older residents remember. They remember Catherine Harris. They remember Edmund's isolation. They remember the night the truth finally came to light after 20 years of darkness. I visited Beaufort while researching this case, walked the streets where the Harris family walked, stood at the lot where their house once loomed. I visited Catherine's grave. Someone had left fresh flowers there, even after all these years. An act of remembrance for a woman who was nearly forgotten forever. What strikes me most about this case is the layers of tragedy it contains. Yes, Catherine's murder is horrific. A young woman killed by the man she'd promised to spend her life with, simply because she wanted to leave. That's tragedy enough. But then there's Edmund's tragedy. A man who made a terrible choice and spent 20 years imprisoned by it, unable to confess, unable to move forward, slowly losing his mind in isolation. His guilt was his own attic, and he could never escape it. And there's the tragedy of time. 20 years during which Catherine's family didn't know what happened to her, couldn't mourn properly, couldn't find closure. 20 years during which everyone who suspected the truth remained silent because it was easier than confronting it. The Harris family inherited more than a house. They inherited a moral obligation. They could have ignored the sounds, dismissed the journals, avoided the attic entirely. Many people would have. It's easier not to know, easier not to look, easier to let the past stay buried. But they looked. They opened that door. They brought the truth to light, no matter how disturbing it was. And in doing so, they gave Catherine something she'd been denied for 2 decades. Acknowledgement, recognition, justice. This case raises uncomfortable questions about the secrets families keep and the price of silence. How many people suspected Edmund but said nothing? How many chose comfort over truth? The sheriff who investigated in 1927 suspected Edmund but couldn't prove it. Did he push hard enough? Or did Edmund's social standing protect him? And what about Thomas Blackwood, Catherine's lover? He knew she was dead, knew Edmund had killed her, and instead of going to the police, he extorted money. For 16 years, he profited from Catherine's murder. He's as morally culpable as Edmund in many ways, choosing personal gain over justice for the woman he claimed to love. The supernatural elements of this case fascinate people. The sounds, the presence, the shadow the Harris family saw. Were they real? Was Catherine's spirit really trapped in that attic, trying to make herself known? Or were they experiencing a combination of old house sounds, psychological suggestion, and their own subconscious picking up on clues that something was wrong? I can't answer that definitively, but I can say this: whether ghost or guilt or mere coincidence, something drove that family to open the attic. Something made them push past fear and uncertainty to uncover the truth. And that something led to Catherine finally being found. The Harris house is gone, but its story remains, A reminder that the past never stays buried as deeply as we'd like to think. Truth has a way of surfacing, even after decades. Secrets have a weight that grows heavier with time, until someone finally has the courage to expose them to light. This has been the story of the Harris family and the disturbing case they found hidden in their attic, a tale of murder, guilt, and the price of silence. A reminder that some inheritances come with obligations we never expected. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Dark Case Files. If you made it through this entire case, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Cases like this, complex, layered, requiring us to sit with uncomfortable truths, are what this channel is about. Leave a comment and tell me, should the Harris family have opened that attic? Would you have had the courage? How do we balance respect for the dead with the need to uncover truth? And how many other secrets like this still remain hidden, waiting to be discovered? If this case affected you, consider that domestic violence and intimate partner murder remain serious issues today. Catherine's story happened in 1927, but women are still being killed by partners who can't accept rejection, who view them as possessions rather than people. If you or someone you know is in danger, please reach out to local resources. Catherine didn't have options. We do. Rest in peace, Catherine Harris. You deserved better than you got in life. A husband who would let you go, a lover who would fight for you, a system that would protect you. But you got justice eventually, and you will not be forgotten. Until next time, stay aware of the darkness that can hide behind normal facades. Stay willing to ask difficult questions. And never forget, the truth matters, even when it's been buried for decades. Especially then. This has been Dark Case Files. I'm your host, and the case of Catherine Harris reminds us that some secrets are too heavy to stay hidden forever, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply open the door. *******.